Welcome to this event as part of Manchester Science Festival, produced by the Science and Industry Museum, where we explore ideas that change the world. I'm Sally MacDonald, the Museum Director. In this event, Our Hydrogen Future, Delivering Net Zero, our panel will explore the potential of the most abundant element in the universe to combat climate change. They'll offer an introduction to hydrogen, examine how it's produced, and discuss its future role as part of the solution in achieving carbon zero targets. We're joined by Amer Gaffar from Manchester Fuel Cell Innovation Centre at Manchester Metropolitan University and Dr. Angela Needle from Cadent Gas. The event is about to begin. Thank you for joining us.
Hello everybody and welcome to this Hydrogen Highlights session with Cadent Gas and Manchester Metropolitan University. I'm Jonathan Collins, the External Affairs Manager at Cadent, and today I'm joined by Amer Gaffar, Director of the Manchester Fuel Cell Innovation Centre at Manchester Met Uni, which also produces hydrogen, I'm told, on the 5th floor, so that's very exciting. And Dr. Angie Needle, Strategy Director at Cadent, who deals with everything hydrogen related at Cadent. Hello both, and thanks very much for joining us today. So in order to kick it off and to start at the very beginning, Amer, can you tell me what hydrogen actually is?
Thanks, Jonathan. I think what you've got to recognise is hydrogen's been around for a long, long time. So in its basic terms, hydrogen is probably the lightest chemical element in the periodic table. And that's as far as most people will know about hydrogen. But for us, it does many other things. So it's one of the most, like electricity, it's an energy carrier. It's not a source of energy, so it must be produced. So hydrogen offers many, many key benefits that increase the potential to replace fossil fuels. So we look at hydrogen in many different aspects as a fuel to be used with the fuel cells that we research and develop in conjunction with many, many businesses. But for us, hydrogen is one of those energy vectors that has really the opportunity to decarbonise at scale.
Oh, excellent. Always good to hear decarbonisation at scale. And speaking of which, Angie, there's lots of excitement at the moment around hydrogen. So when we're talking about net zero, why is hydrogen such a huge topic?
Yeah, it's a good question. So as Amer's just described, hydrogen's an energy vector. It's a gas that stores energy. And when we didn't have net zero, there was the bit that was really hard to decarbonise that was everybody else's problem. Right, so we can get so far with renewables and electric vehicles, but there's the really difficult bit to do: heavy industry, big transport, heat in our homes that it still uses natural gas today. What hydrogen does as a gas, it enables some of those things to become very low carbon or net zero. So it reaches the places that other solutions can't reach, I would say. And people are excited about it because it is so versatile. You know, it can be a gas, you can burn it, it can power fuel cells, it could be a liquid, you can store it, you can save the energy for a rainy day. So it's really got some versatility as well.
So in that context, Amer, obviously it sounds a great energy vector that we can use going forward, but how is it actually produced? How will we get it produced and used?
So I think everyone is really focusing on the green way and the low carbon way of producing hydrogen, and that's done with a green hydrogen production or blue hydrogen production. Now we're interested in green hydrogen production from an electrolysis point of view in our fuel cell centre. So for example, we look at innovative ways in producing electrolyzers through avenues such as 3D printing or where we're trying to scale up electrolyzers with innovation. Now that's great, and with us, we already work with many sort of companies that are involved in that process. But then we also have to factor in that we also need to produce blue hydrogen, which is where you capture the carbon from natural gas, and then that's the really important factor. And I think I'll probably ask Angie to sort of come in here, because I think that side of things is something that is probably lends itself to Cadent much more than it does to us, because we're interested in obviously hydrogen production, and we use, as you mentioned at the start, we have hydrogen on the 5th floor of a tower block. Now that's there for a research lab, but it's grid connected, so arguably it's not green, but we need to get to how do we generate green hydrogen, and that's really how we are going to decarbonize in a green way. Angie?
Yeah, and the good thing to say about hydrogen here, though, is it's a gas, which we've talked about, but it automatically attaches itself to things. So you can't just capture hydrogen out of the air. You've got to make it. And it's in water, H2O, and it's in methane, CH4. So there's processes to strip the hydrogen out of those chemicals. So for water, processes electrolysis, splits water into hydrogen and oxygen. So you've got the hydrogen to do things with, like fuel cells, or put into the gas grid to heat processes. Or if you want hydrogen at scale, you've got the opportunity to strip the hydrogen out of methane, which is natural gas. And you'd have to capture the carbon that's left behind, the CO2. And that's why we talk about carbon capture and storage and the role that plays in net zero. So they both have a role, and actually there's lots of other different ways of making hydrogen too. And we need quite a lot of it if we're going to get to net zero, because of the variety of different roles and places that hydrogen could be used. So it's really important that we embrace all colours of hydrogen. That, by the way, the gas is not a colour, it's invisible. It's just we've given it a label so that we can understand how it's produced.
So is this part of the kind of the hydrogen rainbow that I've heard about? Is that why you have sort of blue and green? And
yeah, so just to go through the rainbow, you've got grey hydrogen, which is where no CO2 is captured, so it's bad hydrogen, if you like. There's blue hydrogen, where most of the CO2 is captured, so it's low carbon. Green, if the electrolysis process uses renewable electricity, it's zero carbon. You've also got other shades of hydrogen, where the hydrogen is produced from maybe nuclear energy, which is pink or yellow, depending on who you speak to. So it's really just for us bods to, as scientific geeks, to understand the rainbow. But it is quite important, because we need to know that the hydrogen that we've got and that we use is low carbon, and that's really important.
I think that I would agree with Angie there. I think that's the point. We need to get to that low carbon hydrogen, because if we look at the majority of hydrogen production today, it doesn't necessarily lend itself to the colour green, but that's where we really have to get to, or blue. And I think, that's effectively where we're going. We're going for a rainbow approach, and we're just building our way up. And I think that's why the interest in hydrogen to achieve net zero is so popular at the moment, and it's very topical, because we can make a difference if we go through that rainbow scale.
So I think it was mentioned earlier that obviously hydrogen can be used for various different things. So Angie, I think you mentioned industry, you mentioned home heating, but you also mentioned transport. So Amer, from a hydrogen transport point of view, kind of what do we see there, and how does things like hydrogen fuel cells work and hydrogen for transport?
I mean, I'll probably refer this into the best way to describe this is by detailing how we work with some of these organisations who we've supported within our centre. So their obviously ambition is to develop fuel cells. So we've got various different testing stations. Our fuel cell produces electricity and heat through a chemical reaction. There's no combustion involved. What we're really doing is you're converting hydrogen and oxygen into water, and you're generating electricity in that process. But then we have to be mindful, hydrogen has a demand now for transport. So if those vehicles that the transport fleets require are not available, you can clean up existing engines. So we've got various different projects where we're cleaning up diesel engines through the use of hydrogen. Ultimately, we do want to get to using fuel cells within these, and we can develop large-scale electrolyzers that could use these fuel cells. We can reverse engineer that and do it the other way around. So a fuel cell, the best way I always describe it is, if we're talking in transport terms, you never need to increase the size of the fuel cell in some respects. You need to increase the size of the tank. So if we want to do more miles, you need a bigger tank. With a battery, you need a larger battery. Now, if you think of in storage terms, if you're storing lots of energy in a battery form, you'll need quite a big footprint. If you're doing that in a hydrogen equivalent, it doesn't need to be that big. And for a fuel cell for example, there's fuel cell vehicles where the fuel cells that exist in those vehicles today will probably pull something much, much larger. They were over-engineered to prove a point. And I think that's what we need to get to. A fuel cell is kind of like a battery, and as long as that hydrogen that fuels that fuel cell comes from a green source, which is what we were talking about a little while ago, the well-to-wheel argument is great, because we're saying from the point of use of the fuel to actually on the roads, there is no emissions.
That's great to hear, because obviously Cadent have just taken on, I think about 8 hydrogen vehicles, and I've actually driven one. Mm-hmm. So it's good to hear that, obviously the emissions are low, but I think it demonstrates kind of the technology and the impact it's going to have on householders. So speaking of sort of the impact on the general public, on everyone else, and on our lives, so Andy, from a kind of a residential point of view, what can we expect to see the role of hydrogen? What role will hydrogen play in that? And is it going to dramatically change our homes and our transport and our cars?
Yeah, well, if you think about how your house is heated today, there's a real high chance, it's not everywhere, that your house has got natural gas in it in your gas boiler. Mine has. And 85% of all homes in the UK have got natural gas. And you might not realise it, but every minute that your gas boiler's on today, it produces carbon emissions, which is bad, right? So we at Cadent are looking at how we transition away from natural gas in the gas network. Now, we've invested a lot of money in the gas network. Consumers like you have paid for this gas network to exist. But every single home is going to have to think of what it's going to be using to heat it in the future. And one of the ways that we think is viable is producing hydrogen and piping it to your home, so you have a hydrogen boiler exactly the same as your current boiler that burns hydrogen rather than methane. And that is something that we're working through from a safety and a technical feasibility point of view. The good news, and you might not know this, but when you burn hydrogen, it just produces water. So no carbon monoxide emissions, and so that's a positive thing, right? We've all lived through carbon monoxide alarms in our homes for some time, but we've got to make the hydrogen, so we've got to make it such that we can have enough to transport through the gas network. Now, this isn't the only thing that we're looking at to make your homes more energy efficient in the future. So not only would we like people's homes to be better insulated, so you only use the energy that you absolutely have to heat your home, but there are also other options too. So you could have a heat pump which uses renewable electricity to heat your home. You could have a hybrid system that uses a heat pump plus a bit of hydrogen when it's really cold. So there's lots of options available, and we're just researching, in particular for hydrogen, because that's what we do for a living. We transport combustible gases around the country, and we're good at it. So is it right that we move towards hydrogen, and would it work in people's homes? And so that's what we're focusing a lot of the effort in at Cadent.
So from I suppose from a boiler point of view, as you were mentioning boilers, would we expect to see a significant change to what boilers look like today to a hydrogen-ready boiler?
You know what? I've actually been to see some hydrogen boilers, and I could not believe it, because they're exactly the same as a conventional gas boiler. So the clever folks at Baxi and Worcester Bosch have been working hard to say, well, actually, what do people need from their heating in the future? And if the fuel is going to be hydrogen, can we produce a boiler that operates pretty much the same as today? And so we've been really lucky in this country, because we've got hot water and warm homes on demand, and that's been driven by natural gas. And we can't have that going forward. At some point, we're going to have to turn the natural gas tap off. We're going to have to switch it to something else. So the appliances are being developed, and there's no technical reason why you can't have new hydrogen boilers, but you will have to get a new boiler at some point. And what is great, that the appliance manufacturers are creating new boilers and cookers and fires that can burn both methane and hydrogen, such that when we do convert, you don't have to go through getting a new one. So over the next 10, 20 years, when you replace them anyway, chances are you'll get one that's hydrogen ready, which is the new phrase that's being used for these boilers and appliances that are already able to burn hydrogen.
So we've talked about cars, hydrogen cars. We've talked about hydrogen boilers. So I suppose the next question would be: is hydrogen safe? So from a person on the street point of view, is hydrogen in their homes going to be safe?
So if I talk about safety in the home, and then maybe Amer, you pick up car hydrogen safety, because the great thing I think about fuel cells is if people are sitting on hydrogen in their cars, then that's a good thing, right? Because it makes it normal. So absolutely, we have to make sure that hydrogen is safe, right? It is a combustible gas, as is methane, right? So we forget that those yellow pipes out in the street that, you know, they're digging up the road, that's got methane in it today. And we transport that, Cadent and many of the other gas distribution networks 24/7. So you've got natural gas when it's needed, and that goes into your home. So we are safety organisations. So our number one is, can we do it safely? And just rest assured, people who are worried about this, we won't be allowed to do it unless we can prove it is at least as safe as today. So that is really important. And so we've got lots of pilots and trials looking at the safety of putting 100% hydrogen in the gas network and what it means when that hydrogen's in the home. You know, we're doing tests on, you know, what if there's a leak? What happens to the hydrogen? Does it act in the same way as methane? So we've still got some work to do to test all those things. But so far we're confident that we can prove it's at least as safe as today, which is great news.
Yeah, I think I would just mirror that sentiment, Angie. I think from when you mentioned, you know, you're talking of doing tests on pipes, and I went to a facility where they were pulling pipes out of the ground, which are 100 years old, 50 years old, and the new pipes, and actually seeing these tests in progress, and it was fascinating. So I think the safety aspect for me is no different. I mean, yes, it is a combustible gas. The problem isn't the word hydrogen. Hydrogen sometimes gets negative connotations, and I think that's one of the things we've recognized from the day we built our center. Yes, we were generating hydrogen on the 5th floor of a tower block, but the health and safety assessment at the time slowed that process down drastically. And every single business that we've supported from that date, and every single organization we've supported, for the first time we ever took a fuel cell generator into an event venue, it took a week's worth of risk assessments to try and get that approval done. And I think that's the realism, is we use technology today. If you look at the EV battery, if an EV battery has issues in respect of an accident or anything, the fire is going to be there for a period of time, for quite a while, and fire services need to kind of adapt. And I think the same sort of, for me, it's about spreading that knowledge across to everyone that hydrogen is no more dangerous than other combustible gases like methane. Angie mentioned methane. You know, we've been living with that for years. We almost need to rebrand the word hydrogen and call it green gas or something like that, because people will appease it better. So for me, it's not the safety aspect isn't so much on the technology of hydrogen, it's on people's perceptions. And that's one of the things we've really tried to sort of work with, you know, some of the vehicle manufacturers. And I look at a petrol vehicle. I mean, I can cite Toyota's example on this really well, where the fuel cell vehicle that they made and operate, they set it on fire. They did the same with a petrol vehicle. The occupants within the petrol vehicle would have experienced quite a bit of burning in that environment, but the fuel cell would, when the tank exploded, it literally just shot off, because hydrogen is so light and so thin, it will shoot off quite, you know, 700 miles an hour plus. So it's going to be quite a thing, and it's so difficult to kind of ignite. Yes, it is combustible. It is quite difficult to ignite. But you're talking build up of pressure, but we use this every day. We've been using various different technologies like methane for years, and you know, we're coming back to that whole replacement program. I mean, none of us are probably old enough to sort of remember this, but there was a replacement program many years ago around, in town gas, we used to use a lot more hydrogen than we're now. And Angie's right, we've got to switch that pipe off at some point of using methane or natural gas. See, that's got two different names. So yeah, so we may as well look at it from a perception perspective. We need to recognize hydrogen is coming. It has the opportunity to really clean up our act and clean up our cities and help with our net zero ambitions. It shouldn't, the safety aspects are happening, and there's organizations like Cadent, like some of the vehicle manufacturers. There's, you know, in terms of transport, these tests have been done for millions and millions of hours without any problem. So it's just the perception, and that's a key thing. The perception is what we need to get over.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, like you say, because obviously you guys are producing hydrogen on the fifth floor of the university, and there are already hydrogen cars out there. There are obviously lots of safety elements that have, processes that have went through and been met in order for those to happen. So, no, exciting stuff. I think a lot of the conversation is obviously talked about the benefits of hydrogen, which is great to hear. But so, do we see this as the silver bullet? Is this going to solve this net zero challenge, or is there something else that we need to do? Angie, how about you start?
Yeah, no, I think this is really important because we can talk really positively about hydrogen and its role in net zero, and we know quite a lot about it. But let's be honest here, to achieve net zero is going to take a lot of everything. We're going to have to change our behaviour as humans. We're going to have better insulated buildings. We're going to have a lot of renewable electricity, not only to power hydrogen production, but also to produce all the electricity that we need. And I get, asked quite a lot of awkward questions about hydrogen. And the main one usually is, well, why would you produce hydrogen when you can just make renewable electricity and heat your homes with that instead? And that's a good question, right? Because actually electricity is one of the best things to use to do that, right? It's efficient, right? 1 kilowatt here, 1 kilowatt over here. However, getting enough electricity to heat your homes in the middle of winter when it's really, really cold, and heat pumps don't work as well when it's very, very cold, and being able to replicate what the gas network does today. So the amount of energy that the gas network provides is absolutely phenomenal. It's 4, 5, 6 times the electricity network. So if you think in the middle of winter, when it's really cold, you're charging your electric vehicle and your heat pumps running, and every single home's doing the same thing, you're going to have a massive peak of electricity demand all at the same time. And if on that day it's not windy, or all the other things that are going on that make that electricity system work, we're going to have challenges as a country when it comes to resilience. So resilience means having enough to go round. So you need energy, like storage of energy for those moments. Now, we know we can do a bit with batteries, and we know we can do a bit by what they call demand side response, which is stopping using some electricity. But actually, we don't think we can do enough. And so hydrogen plays a really important role there because it fills that gap. And the other thing is, not all buildings can have heat pumps. You just need a certain amount of space, a certain characteristics, certain insulated properties. And we've got lots of wonderful buildings in this country of all different ages and sizes and shapes. You're going to need some options, and hydrogen's a good option because the boiler's largely the same. So it just provides choice and resilience. And I think they're the things that make it useful. There are downsides, right? You've got to make it. It's not going to be cheap. And that's why we've got to think about it really carefully as to where it goes.
So basically, it's one of a number of options in order to get us to net zero. It's going to be needed. Lots of options are going to be needed, and this is just one of them, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's no silver bullet to this. I mean, from exactly what Angie said, I think that's the key message. There's a range of technologies that will get us to net zero. Hydrogen is just one of the ones, probably the best one in my opinion, that's got the ability to link everything else together. There's nothing else like it. There really isn't. I mean, I think just to put this into sort of some kind of practical level, I mean, there's many people out there who drive electric vehicles. You'll recognize that those vehicles don't behave as well in the winter months as they do in the summer months. Range. There's new things that have been developed. Range anxiety. That's now a term. And I've had, I think electric vehicles are great. I've had one, and when you're driving to your destination, i.e. home, and you have 10 miles yet to go and you have 5 miles left on your range, it's quite scary. So you're thinking, am I going to make it home? And I think in practical terms there, what we're finding within the centre is a lot of fleet operators who want to do that continuous mile, or even some of the blue light services, don't want to go down that route because they need that continuous operation. They need that ability to instantly recharge. And I think a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle lends itself to that proposition much, much better.
Oh, great. Well, speaking of which, obviously it sounds like there's lots of practical applications of hydrogen. We can use it in the home for transport. As we've said, it's one of a range of options that we're going to need for net zero. So, Angie, where are we on this hydrogen journey? Obviously, there's parts of it being rolled out, but what do we need to see? What's happening next in order to get it to sort of that critical point that we need to get it to?
Yeah, so we've got the amount of hydrogen we think we need by 2050 is roughly the same as all the electricity that we use today. So if you think about all the things that you plug in, we've got to do that for hydrogen. It's a lot, right? So we need to get hydrogen production going at scale. Now, what the government has done, which is brilliant, is that they've sort of divvied up the jigsaw puzzle. We and the gas distribution companies are looking at is it safe and technically feasible to put it into the gas network. They're doing a big piece of work on having hydrogen in homes for heating to see if that's good, preferable, useful, in addition to electrification and some other solutions. They've also got a really big focus on industrial use of hydrogen. So there's really big industries that need a flame, right? They need energy to produce what it is that they do: chemicals, cement, fertilizers, glass production, steel. And so there's a big investment in industrial clusters, they call them. So where the big heavy industry centres are in the UK, to be centres of hydrogen production. And so the high chances is that we'll have centres of hydrogen production in the northwest, in the northeast, in Teesside, Humberside, in Ellesmere Port, around in the Warrington area around there, and that hydrogen will be used for industry and transport first, and then it will be used going to the gas grid. So we're looking at blending hydrogen into the gas grid, and eventually it will be used in people's homes. And so we've got maybe 10 years to get those big production facilities going, so we can start rolling out hydrogen after that from the 2030s onwards. I mean, this is a long journey. And in the 60s and 70s, we're talking about town's gas. About 40% of your town's gas was hydrogen. And when they converted from town's gas to natural gas in the 60s and 70s, that's exactly what they did. They went zone by zone, converted everybody's homes to what we use today. So we've got a process to go through. We've got a lot of regulatory changes to make. We've got some proof points to prove before we can get that going. But it's definitely one of the solutions that will make a difference to not only the UK carbon emissions, but the UK economy. Think of all the jobs that are in the hydrogen sector. Yeah. Think of all the exciting technology that we could lead, right? Because we're quite good at this. It's something that other countries are nipping at our heels on, actually. So, for anybody who's listening in who's young and excited about the future, I would urge you to think about joining the green sector and the renewable sector and the hydrogen sector as a place to earn your living in the future, because I can tell you it's fairly exciting at this point in time.
Oh yeah.
No, like you say, there's such a range of opportunities. So I think that's really great from a UK point of view. But Amer, from an international perspective, where are other countries? Is this just kind of a UK thing, or are other countries looking at hydrogen as well?
No, I think going back to what Andy just said, I think that the important aspect of all this right now is hydrogen isn't just about the gas. It's not just about the fuel cells. We're actually looking at an economy. This is an economy. So if we look at what the government have committed to, there's a 10-point plan out there. There's many governments that are kind of looking at that and thinking, how can we take a real lead on hydrogen? Our 10-point plan basically highlights that there's going to be a number of strategies that are going to be released this year. One of them is going to be the UK hydrogen strategy. If we look at what Germany did last year, they released theirs. We're trying to do a localized one in Greater Manchester, which will underpin any national strategy. Many governments across the world are trying to do this, but they're not just looking at this as a technology response. I think, Andrew, the biggest change we can make in all this is probably the people side. So Andy mentioned, the skills element, and we have developed, one of Europe's first targeted programs of hydrogen education for schools. It's called schools, the resources are all available online, and our ambition was always to start with school children who are in school today, then moving up through skills. So Andrew mentioned the industrial clusters. I think completely agree. Those clusters are those areas that you need to decarbonise, because they're hard to decarbonise. Now, the hydrogen will be produced for them, but then what about the cities that are landlocked? Greater Manchester, we're at Manchester Science Festival. Manchester's landlocked in that essence. We don't have that space really to build lots and lots of infrastructure. So how do we achieve our hydrogen ambitions? Well, we do it by getting hydrogen from that source within the industrial clusters. That's one avenue. Through the gas network is another avenue. Well, completely through that avenue. We talk about electrolyzers, and we talk about many other cities are doing that same thing. So if we look at hydrogen as an economy, this is emerging. What do we need? Well, we need skills. That's something we're good at. We as universities are now collaborating together in the Northwest to see what skills do we need to provide as academic institutions that will lead us to 2038. How do we achieve net zero? What you'll find is there's a lot more courses that will be released around an energy transition or net zero, how to achieve net zero. I mean, but then it's about, if I'm looking at our own journey for our centre, there's a lot of international cooperation that we've had. That high schools programme that I mentioned, that was collaborating with 6 or 7 other countries across the world. Fantastic, because some of those ideas that they had were better than ours. And I think that's the point with this. Yes, if we look in vehicle terms, there's some countries that want to lead the market for vehicle manufacturing. China, Japan, Toyota's one of the biggest car companies in the world. They developed one of the first fuel cell vehicles. So they have an ambition around fuel cell vehicles and leading the pack. China exactly the same, or even parts of Korea, Japan. There's many countries. But what you'll find that is underpinning every single country's development is their government are launching hydrogen strategies which are underpinned with a lot of R&D focus, brilliant, a lot of skills focus, brilliant. It's how it's going to affect the economy. One of the good things about where we are right now is we're coming out of a pandemic. One of the greatest things is that we're trying to build back better in a greener, more sustainable way. And our ambition is always around net zero. Many countries have that same ambition. Angie, I think that's probably what is required. It's not just focusing on the topic of hydrogen. Hydrogen is a big topic if you expand out all the different areas it covers.
Yeah, and just to add into that, because we're in Manchester Science Week, right, and Science Festival,
Mm-hmm.
like Manchester's got brilliant credentials here. Not only is it in the Northwest where we think hydrogen's going to happen first. So I haven't talked about HyNet. HyNet is the consortium of companies that have got together to bring hydrogen at scale to the Northwest. So we're going to make some hydrogen. It's going to happen here first. And so, this puts this region on the map, right? There's lots of other places wanting to do it, but they'll not touch it, right? So we've got an opportunity here to make this the sort of green centre of the UK. I think it's really exciting. So all about jobs, all about meeting net zero.
Oh, great. We're actually running out of time now, so we've got about 5 minutes, and we've had a couple of questions in. So what I'll do is I'll pick about 3, and we'll answer them in the last 5 minutes, and then we'll wrap up then. So the first one that we had through was, what role do governments and large corporations play in enabling the introduction of hydrogen to our energy supply?
Yeah, I'll cover that off I'll cover it off quite quickly. So government have been very helpful, right? But there's lots of rules around the use of hydrogen right now. So the existing gas network is only allowed to have methane in it. So we've got to change the law just to put some hydrogen in. So there's lots of little things that need unlocking to enable that to happen. We've got to make sure we can bill it properly, for example. And we've got to work out a way to ensure that consumers can pay for it in a fair way. So that is all going well. I really think the government need to invest more in the technical development and the innovation side of things. And actually the scale of net zero means this is significant, right? So not only can significant gains be made, but let's be honest here, this is going to take quite some effort. So some financing or some ways of financing these kind of projects would be good. The only other thing that's needed is for investors, so private companies that want to invest in hydrogen, is that they just need to know how it's going to work. So what kind of I don't want to get too complicated, but what kind of business models do we need to enable companies to make money, from this particular sector? So how do we make sure that it attracts private sector investment and that it is reasonable rate of return, if you like, for the potential risk of doing something new. So they're the things that are really needed. But I'm confident that the hydrogen strategy that's going to come out this year will include those kinds of things and really unlock that.
So you mentioned earlier that obviously hydrogen was being used previously through the town's gas, I think you said in the 60s and 70s. And then you've just sort of picked up the point there about a hydrogen blend that would be needed. So is that kind of hydrogen blend work going on, or do people actually have hydrogen in their networks and in their households already?
Yeah. So today there's no hydrogen in the gas network, except in a few places where we're doing experiments. So the plan is you can blend 20% of hydrogen into your existing gas network, and nobody needs to do anything. You don't need a new boiler or a new appliance. And that is great because you can immediately reduce the carbon emissions of the natural gas that you're using. It just needs some changes to some legislation to enable us to do that. And we need to work out how we bill customers properly for it. But what's great about if you can blend some hydrogen, so you get a mixture of methane and hydrogen, is that it gives a place for the producers to put it. It creates demand. And that is what we really need, consistent demand, so that people who are making it can put it somewhere. So I'm really supportive. And Cadent, we are doing all kinds of projects on blending. We've just finishing a piece of work at Keele University where we've been blending green hydrogen into their campus's gas network. And so little do they know. No, they do know, right? So they've been getting hydrogen, but they haven't. There's no difference. Nobody's. It doesn't affect their appliances and things like that.
And yet, still making carbon savings. So great news, great project. So the second question that we've had come in, Amer, maybe if you could take this one. So, is the use of hydrogen as climate friendly as renewables?
See, for me, again, I'll link it back to that previous question. So what governments can do. I mean, I sit and work with government on, at the moment, trying to define a green standard for hydrogen, as with alongside representatives from Cadent. I think within that group, they're looking at blue and green hydrogen. I think that you need to look at this in a different way. If we're talking about producing lots and lots of green hydrogen, how do we get that? If you look at curtailment, where in practical terms, where we see a lot of wind turbines as we drive up and down the motorways, well, not at the moment, but yeah, when we're out of lockdown, when we're allowed to drive, you see all those wind turbines stood still. Those stood still, and that's called curtailment. So those operators who own and operate those turbines still have to be paid that subsidy. So for me, that's an ideal time to run an electrolyzer. So Andy mentioned earlier on around, it's about transferring energy. So why would you generate hydrogen when you can just plug something in? That's the ideal time to run an electrolyzer, in my opinion, because the electricity is going to be produced. All that wind turbine stood still is telling me is that the grid can't take the amount of electricity that is producing at that point in time. So it's been told to stop. So run an electrolyzer, and then we move the hydrogen around through the gas network, or we move it around through tube trailers or very many other mechanisms that we use today. So I think that's probably, in my opinion, the best way to get support like that. So I think it's linking different initiatives that make it make sense. Yesterday there was an air quality bill being talked about. If we're talking about net zero, hydrogen it's linking that. We do too many things in silo, and I think that's where the problems lie for me, because there are so many different areas that this lends itself to. And if we link them all together, which we're good at, you'd be amazed what we can do.
I think, like has been mentioned, obviously, like you say, it's more about a sort of a whole system approach to energy planning than it is about sort of looking at one technology over another. So, no, excellent point. And the final one, in the final sort of 60 seconds that we've got, I think we have touched on this, but it's definitely worth mentioning again and sort of answering again. So is the use and storage of hydrogen safe?
Yeah, well, the answer to that is so far right? So as we test, hydrogen, and as we start introducing it into the gas grid, hydrogen's already transported and stored in lots of places all around the world, right? So we're not starting with a blank sheet of paper. And just to assure people, yet again, we'll not be allowed to put hydrogen in the gas network unless we can prove it's safe. We'll not be allowed to put it in your homes unless we can prove it's safe. And there's hundreds of years of experience with natural gas. There's tens of experience with hydrogen, tens of years. So we're getting there. It will take some time, but we will test it, so it's not like we're just going to unleash it on people. And the safety, measures and things that will need to be put in place, we will do so. So, rest assured, I think that, that will be in hand.
Perfect. Well, we are out of time now, so thank you both very much for talking today. It's been really exciting. Amer, just one final point. If people wanted to find out more information about high school, where would they have to go to get that?
So all the resources are available through either the Fuel Cell Innovation Centre's website, or there is actually a dedicated site for high schools. That's hyschools.eu. And there's resources available under 11 different topic areas, all to do with hydrogen. It's amazing.
Sounds fab.
Well, definitely. And yeah. Angie, if anyone had any other questions, is there anywhere that they could go to get their answers?
Yes, so if you look at the Cadent website, we've got a whole section on future of gas, and we've even got our hydrogen chatbot. So if you ask it a hydrogen question, it will give you a sensible answer. And if it doesn't, we'll find one for you. So yeah, it'd be great.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I love that chatbot.
Oh,
there you go.
Excellent. Well, that's great. Thank you both so much for your time.
We hope you've enjoyed this session, and if you feel inspired by what you've heard, please do visit Manchester Science Festival website, where you'll be able to find the full programme of this year's talks and exhibitions and more information about the topics that we've discussed. Thank you for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.